Just to let everyone know, I have just started recording the call. So we are recording it and we'll share it on our YouTube channel afterwards for anyone that's not been able to join us. Okay. In terms of the agenda, as I said, there's quite a lot to go through. Hopefully everyone's had the guidance for return to play and also the preparing your facilities guidance that came out last week. We're gonna go through both of those and just try and summarise some of the key points within it. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the umpires and scorers guidelines, and then we've got an update on All Stars and junior cricket. So we will go through all of that. As I said, we'll take questions at the end, but if there's any that we don't manage to cover on the call, we're going to plan to produce an FAQs document, which we'd hope to get out at some point tomorrow. The ECB are also going to be sending out an FAQs document based on some of the national questions. So hopefully between us we'll be able to answer most of it. To start off then, just a bit of an update where we're at. I think last time we spoke, we got the majority of the team were furloughed. So from the 1st of July, we brought back James and Tom on 2 days a week. And Dave Moore has also come back 1 day a week to focus on the women and girls player pathway. And we hope to phase other members of staff over the coming months back to work. Hopefully, most clubs will have had contact in the last few days from James, Tom, and Charlie, and probably Mick just to catch up and see where everyone's at. They'll continue to do that over the coming week and hopefully provide some one-to-one support if needed. As always, we're available on the phone and emails and video calls if needed. Keep an eye on the social media. One thing you might have seen, we're running a charity walkathon event the last week in July, and we'd welcome your support on that. The money we're raising for that is going towards a return to cricket fund, so hopefully that should benefit clubs as we manage to get back to play. Okay. So the first part of this, we're just going to take you through some of the facility guidance around opening up facilities. Now, I'm aware many clubs opened facilities at the weekend. Some clubs haven't yet. So Mick's just going to start and talk you through some of the guidance. Mick, do you want to just test your microphone?
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah, perfect. I'll leave
okay,
it to you.
Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone. Just going to spend a few minutes going through what we need to do around the facilities. You've all had, well, I guess we've sent out all the information that we've had on an ongoing basis, so I hope everyone's had a chance to have a look at it. I'll just try and pick up one or two key points as we go along. So I think what's really important to remember is that, you know, within law, we've got a duty of care to make sure that the health, safety and well-being of all the participants is looked after. So this means really around making sure we follow the UK government and public health advice. Just one thing about that, it's changing on a pretty regular basis, as you will have seen. So please make sure that you keep up to date with that. And likewise with the ECB guidance and protocols, we can literally get something one day and then we have to change it the next day. So it's very, very important that you keep behind that. Richard, is that okay? I'm getting a bit of an echo back here.
Yeah, I think someone's microphone's not muted, so just make sure your microphones are muted, please.
Okay. Within the guidance, there's a full COVID-19 risk assessment along with an action plan that clubs need to follow. So please make sure you use those documents. And last but not least around that is a safeguarding policies. We still need to make sure that we follow an ECB safeguarding policies. Now, I know that quite a few people we were stopped in our tracks when we're delivering our safeguarding program, but I know we're back underway on a virtual basis, so we will be catching up with people. If your club welfare officer hasn't done their training yet, or you have a welfare officer who's out of training, please let me know, and we'll make sure that we can catch up on that through the ECB. And I guess the last thing on this slide is for me, and I believe that we're the first recreational teams to walk back, and I think that gives us a bit of added responsibility to make sure we do it right, because there's no doubt there will be a lot of interest in what happens on Saturday when we start playing competitive cricket again. Richard, can you move on to the next slide, please? Okay, so around managing people. So we're going to have everything's going to look slightly different, and you're going to have different strategies in place to manage different groups of people, and they're all there, the different people that you're going to have. The one thing that I would think is key around all this is making sure we communicate as well as we can with everyone involved. So our own players, participants, juniors, parents, as well as the opposition and officials on the day, spectators. You know, can you get this out as wide as possible within your own environment? The importance of making sure we manage what's happening on the day. You will more than likely have an increase in the volume of traffic coming to your grounds. Restrictions on vehicle sharing means there's more car parking. As you go through the playing guidance, you'll also see that the advice around players, if it rains, is that they use their cars as cover. So you may want to put a space for spectators to park in and a space for players overlooking the ground. How are you going to be getting people around the ground? Where are they going to go? How long are they going to stay? Obviously, if people are there longer, there's a greater demand on all the services that you've got or what you use on the day. Richard, can you just move it on to the next one, please? Okay. Mentioned previously the risk assessment and communication. And it's really important that you communicate that around your own club and make sure all your own users are well aware. And hopefully, if every club does that, it should minimise issues on the day. Website, social media, direct email. I'd certainly suggest that there's some correspondence with your opposition for the coming week at some point during the week leading up to it. Have we got somebody there with a? Could you please turn your microphone off, please? Okay. At the ground, signage, really important that you've got good signage. There's lots of useful stuff the ECB have produced, and also Sport England, that you can use to get that around the ground and make sure it's very clear where people can go, who can do what. Try and avoid things like lots of touch points if you can. So it might be things like leaving doors open and making it easier for people to get around. Whereas normally, if you might close things, but try and make it as easy as possible. One thing that is worth just picking up on is that if you've got certain things that you're doing, so for example, if you've got bar and you've got people working on the bar, then there might be some training that people have to do, and you need to keep a record of that to make sure that people using the bar understand their responsibilities around that. Move on, Richard, please. In terms of building, you will need to assess how many people you can get in your building. You are allowed to use your buildings if you want to. You don't have to, but you are allowed to use them if you want to, based on social distancing guidelines. So there is a need to make sure that you actually assess how many people you can get in and have appropriate signage and floor marking and displaying the maximum occupancy. And seating, face-to-face seating should be avoided wherever possible. Now, one of the things I did refer to it earlier is that players if there is rain about, the recommendation is that players use cars, so the building would be left for spectators and I guess other people that might be using the facility. Richard, could we move on to the next slide? Social and hospitality, and I think it's important to remember that that's what we come under and we're classed under. So we are cricket clubs and have pavilions and clubhouses, but we're same as any other operation that's offering hospitality. So the general principles around outdoor service being preferable, making sure your spaces use one-way systems, seating, side to side, and social distancing maintained at all times. And particularly the bottom one there, signage around the need to practice good hygiene. And as I say, there's lots of signage that you can use to display that. Next one, Richard. Now I know there's not going to be any tees in club cricket. I know that's been decided through the league, but you are allowed to use your bars. Technology, contactless payments, there's an increasing number of clubs that are using that. It's preferable if you possibly can, and having some sort of a method of ordering without lots and lots of people going into the clubhouse. So there's lots of clubs using different methods for that. Some are using apps, some are using text messaging services. Once again, touch points minimised, no beer mats, tablecloths, doors open, mentioned that, PPE for glass collection, washing of glasses. All this information is available to you. The point at the bottom, disposable items are an option, but creates waste management. So it can be costly if you have to have bins and taking stuff away all the time. So you might be better washing as normal, but fresh glasses each drink. Next one, Richard, please. And cleaning. As you go through the guidance, you'll see it's pretty standard stuff, but disposable paper towels prepared in toilets, and signage, as much signage as you can to remind the people the need for good hygiene and hand cleaning. Cleaning regimes, really important. Surface cleaning, touch points cleaned every hour. So it may be that you might, if you're opening your clubhouse, that you might have to close it for 5 or 10 minutes, an hour, just to cater for some cleaning. And tables should be cleaned after every customer leaves. And once again, government guidelines on collecting customer information, and Richard will go through that as we go a little bit later in the webinar. Next one, Richard, I think. Last one I think for me. So first aid, essential. Everybody should have a first aid kit anyway that's accessible for people to use. If you've got an AED, please make sure it's working and serviced. And there's some really useful guidance, St John's Ambulance. So that's worth having a look if you've got no one with a first aid background, or you just need to refresh the specific advice and guidance around COVID-19. That is certainly worth a look at. Once again, we're on to hand cleaning there, and what you can use, minimum 60% alcohol. What to do? The last bit, I think, for me, COVID-19. If there is someone that's suspected of having COVID-19 or fall on your facility, you do need to try and have a separate space where they could be isolated. So that might be a dressing room, because your dressing rooms shouldn't be in use. Could be in the umpire's room, and contact someone else from their household, or if not, phone 111 and wait for instructions. Well ventilated, and you will need some appropriate PPE and cleaning products if you do get a case of COVID. And I think, have I got any more, Richard? I think that's it for me for the time being.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Mick. Great stuff. Thanks, mate. Sorry, just before I move on, Nikki, are you okay? Just turn your camera off, please, if you know it was on or not. Perfect. Thank you. Right, okay, we're going to move on to the playing guidance, which was issued yesterday. So just going to try and summarise. There's a lot of information on the slides. Don't intend to go through everything on the slides, but just pull out some of the key points. So just in terms of prior to cricket activity, Mick will have just covered some of this. But obviously before any activity takes place, clubs certainly need to have completed a risk assessment. That's really important. I noticed a question on the chat from Ian around there's already been one done. That, you know, as a cricket club, you need to complete your own risk assessment to ensure it's cricket specific. The ECB have provided that template, so you should be able to use that, and we'll provide the links later. The other thing is, you know, making sure that you mitigate any risks that might arise from that assessment. And then once you've done that, making sure you communicate all protocols and precautions with all participants ahead of them arriving at the ground. In terms of individuals, the advice you should be giving to your players and anyone else attending the ground is obviously to carry out any symptoms check before leaving the house. So if they have any of the COVID symptoms listed on the NHS and government websites, they shouldn't be leaving the house. So ensure that they're advised of that. That is obviously in the guidance. And then the other one is around personal hygiene, making sure that before leaving, all, you know, they're cleaned and everything in terms of hygiene, and then the same should be carried out at home afterwards. So there'll be no showering and stuff at the ground. That's really important. Participants should arrive changed, ready to play. So as Mick's alluded to, there's no change in facilities, so they must turn up in their cricket gear, ready to go. Just worth pointing out on the use of clubhouse changing rooms. It says in the guidance, based on latest UK government guidance, at the moment, guidance is that changing rooms cannot be used. I think some announcements have been made this afternoon around leisure centres reopening and swimming pools from the 25th of July. So it's probably likely at that point that the guidance may change. So we will obviously update you and keep you in the loop on that as and when we find out. But for the time being, changing rooms can't be used. Okay. Just thought I'd share this. It was something sent to me earlier on today. Just a really simple but quite effective way of sending some communication out, whether it be through social media or direct, but with some simple categories. So you've got something for players, spectators and parents, your juniors, general stuff around the club, and then obviously your bar and food facilities. But it's really simple, quite effective, and just picks out some of the key points that you need people to follow before they attend the ground. So obviously we'll share these slides and you'll have that. So in terms of cricket activity, you will have seen in the guidance it allows for 11 aside, so 11-a-side games, and a maximum of 30 players, officials and coaches involved in the game. Those that are in the County League and the Premier League will know that it's going to be 40 overs and 11 aside, so that's all been communicated with you. One thing just to clear up, the 30 participants is coaches, officials and players, so it doesn't include spectators. Spectators are allowed in addition to the 30 players, but obviously they would fall under the general social distancing rules and hospitality within the club, so you need to make sure social distancing is adhered to. Some of the other key points on there is all players and officials obviously need to maintain social distancing at all times. No matter what. Celebrations, things like that during the game need to be socially distanced. I'm sure there'll be some interesting celebrations created. All participants need to sanitise hands before they take the field. No cricket teas, as Mick's already suggested, so players will need to bring their own food, and no sharing of water bottles. There's there's guidance in there to suggest that sharing of equipment is to be limited and avoided if at all possible. Some of the questions we've had have been around sharing of helmets and equipment at junior age groups. We are seeking clarity on that from the ECB at the moment. It does technically, the guidance allows it, but obviously there's more risk involved in sharing a helmet and sharing wicket keeping gloves and so on. So we'll hope to get some information to you over the next day or so on that. Okay. So the after cricket guidance is pretty simple in terms of straight after game, participants need to sanitize, so wash their hands and sanitize. Exit in the ground is important, so whatever the exit route is out of the ground, ensure that people can still maintain social distancing. Social gatherings after cricket are allowed, providing the club can meet all the hospitality guidance that's been sent out previously. So that is possible. You can have a drink after the game or after training and whatever, but providing the club can meet all the guidance and compliant with that. Regular cleaning of equipment and facilities should take place. So, for instance, if there's a session on Saturday morning, a junior training session Saturday morning, and then you've got a game in the afternoon, you would need to do a fairly thorough clean down of any sort of touch points and seating and things like that to ensure everywhere is nice and clean and ready to go again. Okay, so I think it's really important to point out that before anyone opens facilities or plays any cricket, that we do need to comply and meet the guidance. So, as I said, the risk assessment needs to be done, and you should have a copy of it available on site. So if there was any checks or anything that went on, you've got evidence of it there, but also from an insurance point of view. As I mentioned, make sure you've got appropriate signage. There's a really good resource on Sport England's Club Matters with signage, and there's some signage documents on the ECB's resource hub. All of the links we'll put in the slides when we send them out, so you should be able to access them. Sanitisation stations are really important. Certainly have a table with some disinfectant and some sanitisation gels and things on the table, so that anyone attending the ground can access them. Just on that, anyone that signs up for NatWest Cricket Force will receive a sanitisation pack, which I think will have wipes and gels and things in. So worth signing up just so you can access that. Clear signage for parking, entry and exits. So make sure people know where they've got to park when they arrive. The other thing I would recommend is be really clear where you'd expect people to go on arrival. So from a reporting point of view, make sure that they know when they arrive that they need to go and check in or whatever at a certain point. As we know, you need to take part in the test and trace program. So all people on the ground, whether it be spectators, players, officials, you need to collect full name, email and phone numbers for them all. Making sure it's secured storage, so you're storing it securely, it can't be accessed by others. You do need to keep it for 21 days on record, and then it needs to be discarded after that point, obviously complying with data protection. But that is really, really important. We've been asked the question, what happens if someone doesn't want to give the details? You can ask them to leave, and you should ask them to leave the facility. So if they're not willing to give you their details to comply with test and trace, you should ask them to leave. Whether that be a player, spectator, member of the club, you need to take those details. And the same thing, if you feel like they're giving you false details, then the same thing applies. Okay. just thought it'd be worth sharing this with you. It's not exact science. It's not exactly how you need to do it, but it's just an example of potentially how your ground could be set up come Saturday when people are going to be playing. Just demonstrates that players need to be given designated areas to sit, and they should be with their kit. So it's not a case of here's your kit and dump your kit over there and go and sit somewhere else. Players do need to have an area to sit, and ideally, well, they do need to be socially distanced between each player of each team, and the same for umpires and officials given separate places within the ground. All need to be outside. You'll have seen the diagram around the pitch markings within the guidance, and again we've had a few questions on that. So the batting lines, the running lines that need to be placed, we are trying to get some further clarity from the ECB as to how they are marked out in terms of, do they need to be painted solid lines, can they be discs? From the early steer is that they can be marked out with plastic discs if you don't want to put white lines down on the pitch, but you do need to mark lines either side of the pitch from the popping crease 2 meters, and then the idea behind that is that both the non-striker and striker will run in the same 2 meter running lines to avoid any contact with the bowler, and also when the non-striker's waiting at the non-striker's end, he or she is socially distant from the umpire. So that's really important that they're put in place. I believe it's going to be covered in the FAQs document from the ECB, but if it isn't, we will make sure that comes out to you as soon as possible for clarity. Okay. In terms of match play then, so there's some added guidance around what to do to be socially distanced during the match. One key thing is that players, as I said, should always remain socially distanced at 2 meters, with the exception of the wicket keeper and the slip cordon, who can be 1 meter plus. That is the only exception. So effectively, the keeper can probably almost be stood up to the stumps, not going to be far off at 1 meter plus. Obvious things around no sweat and saliva to be applied directly to the ball, so that must be avoided. Every 6 overs or 20 minutes into the game, every 20 minutes, depending on which comes first, the ball will need to be cleaned, and all players will need to sanitise, and umpires. So that's really, really important. The umpires will manage that in terms of the breaks, but with a fielding captain's responsibility to ensure that the ball is clean and all players sanitise their hands. Obviously, we want to try and minimise the risk and any contact with the ball, so the ball must be passed directly from the wicketkeeper back to the bowler, or from fielder back to bowler, so it won't be passed around the field like we've always done. Just in terms of the ball, I've just seen that question. It's antibacterial wipes that needs to clean it. So that's there'll be some guidance. There is some guidance on there around the wipes. It needs to be cleaned thoroughly every 6 overs or 20 minutes with antibacterial wipes. In terms of responsibility for that, I think the fielding team should take responsibility for when they are fielding for cleaning the ball and on their hands, and therefore I'd expect each team on the day to have their own wipes and sanitisation products available for their players. So I don't see it being the responsibility of the home team to provide them for both teams. I think it would be fair to expect each team to take care of that while they're fielding. Just in terms of spectators, so obviously you need to remain socially distanced, and as I said, they come under the general social distancing guidance of groups of 6, still socially distanced. So the groups of 30 doesn't apply to spectators. They should, under no circumstances, touch the ball. So, we're all used to it. The ball gets hit for 4 and someone watching the game picks it up, throws it back. That can't happen. And I'd probably advise that that's communicated with anyone entering the ground to watch the game, either on arrival or before, with any pre-match comms that go out. May even be worth putting some signage up around the ground if you're happy to do that. Just a few considerations around the safety within the gameplay. So things to consider are sight screens. What happens when the sight screen needs moving. I think that comes down to you as a club to define the process for that. You could have sanitization gels available on the sight screen so that players clean their hands before pushing and afterwards. Or you could have designated people within the club that are going to manage that during the day. Again, whatever works best for you, but just something to consider. That also applies to covers as well. So, how are you going to push the covers on or pull the sheet on if it's raining? And then hopefully we're not going to have any rain, and we're going to get 10 weeks of great weather. But if we do, as Mick said earlier, then the guidance suggests participants and officials need to return to the cars wherever possible. So that's we shouldn't be going into the clubhouse to take cover. Should be heading back to the cars if they've got a car there. Clubs may need to consider what other outdoor space under cover is available. So there's been suggestions of gazebos and things. So just bear that in mind to the groups that you've got attending the ground. Okay. Scorers. So there is all scorers and umpires have had some separate guidance go out to them. That's members of the ACO that have had that. Now, where possible from a scorer's point of view, ideally score boxes shouldn't be used. It's much safer if they're scoring outside in the open air. But if a score box is needed, if it's big enough to socially distance with 2 and the scorers are comfortable with that, then that would be probably the worst case. Ideally, you'd only have 1 person within the score box, and the score box needs to be well ventilated and so on. But certainly in your preparations, you should be considering where scorers are going to sit to ensure they're socially distanced and that they're protected as well. That's really important. Players and umpires shouldn't enter the score box if it's used. We're all guilty of that. If players go in to see how many balls they face to get 10 runs or whatever, that's a no. You can't do that. And avoid communal score books. Where this might be difficult is where you don't have a scorer and it's being passed around. So think about what precautions you can put in place around sanitisation and things. If that is the case, ideally you're going to have 1 scorer looking after the scoring all day. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I've just seen Jane's point about using electronic scoring. That's a good point. So if you can use electronic scoring, then that would be a great idea. It's updated, it's live online, and people can check scores. But with everything, all of these guidelines, regular sanitisation is really important, and scorers, umpires, and players and officials need to be doing that. Okay, moving on to umpires. So again, as I said, have had separate guidance. They are having a Zoom call this evening, I think another one tomorrow, where we've invited captains to join, so they can share some of the protocols around the match play. But effectively, umpires will be managing and ensuring that the social distancing is maintained during the game. So it will be to their discretion as to what that looks like, and ensuring that people are adhering to the guidelines. So I think that, I'm hoping they're not going to have any issues with that, but they will be managing that. Umpires aren't allowed to handle the ball. So, typically when you take a wicket or a break, we'd throw the ball to the umpire to avoid any tampering with it. That can't happen. So the ball will be placed at the stumps at any break, but umpires shouldn't be handling it. So please don't go and throw on the ball. The standing umpire at the relevant end will replace bails and remake the wickets whenever they're dislodged or anything. And the fielding captain, as I said earlier, is responsible for cleaning the ball. It's not the umpire's responsibility to clean the ball. Now, I appreciate there's going to be games played at the weekend where umpires aren't provided, so that you're going to have club members or players standing at the umpire's end during the game. So again, I think just take extra precautions there. So examples would be cleaning down the stumps and bails when there's a change of umpire if they've been handled. So if the umpires had to replace the bails, then when the next umpire joins the pitch to replace them, there should be a cleaning down of those things that they've touched just to protect. So just obviously take as many precautions as you can there. Okay, just going to take a pause. So we're just going to move on. We've got some information on children's activity in All Stars. Some of it's in the guidance, some of it isn't. Tom's going to talk you through that. So Tom, if you're able to just unmute and check your sound.
Yeah, can you hear me, Richard?
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, so I'll just move the slides on and it's all yours.
Hi everyone. Just 2 quick slides for you on a bit of support with some children's activity in All Stars. First thing to mention is that all the guidance that Richard and Mick have been through still applies to children's cricket, whether that's playing a game or training. The maximum group size is 30, and that includes any coaches or parent helpers if that's All Stars. That 30 must stay together for the session as well. So one coach couldn't work with multiple groups throughout an evening. You'll see the ratios there. So 1 to 8 for age 8 and under, and 1 to 10 for age 9 and over. So they apply to group training sessions, not to net situations. The guidance is still the same on that, with the 6 people per group at the moment. Just a bit of info. So parents don't count towards the group of 30 for transport. So it's only the people involved in the game that will count to that group of 30. Obviously, if they're helping score or helping umpire, then they do count. It mentions there around social distancing, all the same protocol still in place. Just around the group, so you can have multiple groups on your ground at the same time, but make sure you've done a risk assessment, and also make sure obviously things like travel arrangements and arrival and departure are nice and clear if we're having lots of people on that ground. Next one, please, Richard. So just All Stars. So you might have seen the guidance that All Stars can return at some point later in the summer. Just for everyone's notice, James, Charlie and myself will get in touch with people over the next week just to have a conversation about whether you want to run or not. There were no pressure from us. Obviously, it's been a really good program in the past to get kids involved, but under the circumstances, we appreciate clubs in different places with it. You'll see there's a date of Friday the 22nd for you to make that decision, and there'll be some flexibility around how you run it. So it could be 2 sessions per week or slightly longer sessions, things like that. There's going to be more guidance coming out on All Stars over the next week, so this will just give you a little bit of a flavour for it. Again, maximum group size will be 30. That obviously needs to factor in any parent helpers and meeting the 1 to 8 ratio. So you're probably looking at a maximum of 24 kids and 3 adults for your session or for that group. Again, you could have more than one group on the ground at the same time if you wanted to and you've done the risk assessment for it. There'll be some guidance coming out on around activities and things. Like I said, over the next week, they've tried to modify it as best as possible to make it run nice and smoothly. That's everything. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to questions. Now, when people register for the call, we ask you to just log any questions that you've got for us. So Charlie's collated them and he's just going to ask them on behalf of everyone now, and we'll try and give you the answers we can. Please bear with us. Obviously, this is new guidance to us as well, and we'll do our best. I have literally just received the FAQs document from the ECB, so we will be sharing that as soon as possible after the call. But we'll do our best to answer them and hopefully pick up some of the questions that have been put in the chat. So, Charlie, do you want to unmute and just fire away?
Yeah, can you hear me, Rich?
Yes.
Yes, cheers, mate. We just got some of the questions that came up quite regularly, or some of the ones we chose were good questions to follow up on. So, firstly, Rich, how could clubs and officials police social distancing if it isn't being followed?
Yeah, okay. I think I mentioned it earlier in the call, but yeah, clubs, as Mick said, clubs do have a duty of care to manage the facilities, in line with the guidance. And if the guidelines aren't followed, then technically individuals should be asked to leave the facility. That it's in everyone's best interest and safety in mind that any decision making should be based on that, the safety of everyone on the ground. So if it's not being adhered to, then first thing would be the person is asked to leave, and then in extreme cases, you would abandon the game. But I think that's really important that those decisions are made. As I said, umpires will manage that process on the field during games, and hopefully we're not going to have that. People have been waiting to play cricket for the last 10 weeks or so. Hopefully we can do it safely and everyone can have a good experience.
Great. Next one, been asked a few times, this one. Do we need a one-way system to move spectators around the ground?
Yeah. So I think again, it depends a little bit on the size of the ground. So, when you do your risk assessment, this should be something that you highlight. For grounds where there's very limited space between the boundary rope and the perimeter of the ground, then I would suggest, yes, you do need a one-way system to avoid breach of social distancing. But if you've got a nice big outfield where you've got lots of space beyond the boundary rope, then I think that'll be, provide people can social distance as they walk around, and I don't think that'll be required. Same thing does apply to indoors. You do need to assess that and decide whether you need a door for entry and one for leaving, and just one way through that. But that will change from club to club.
Okay, good stuff. This one, just probably a quick one. Can county under 12 players play in senior cricket this year?
Yeah, so the normal process should be followed. So clubs will need to request permission for a county under 12 to play. So for the girls' pathway, that would be Dave Moore. So contact Dave, and he would assess the ability of the player and whether it's safe for them to play in an under 12 in an open age game. And for the boys' pathway, it would normally be Gareth Marshall, but he's furloughed. So I'm spoken to Darren Smith earlier today, and he would have that conversation. So when we share the slides after, we'll make sure Darren's details are included. So for any under 12 county boys wanting to play open age cricket on a Saturday or any day, they will need to contact Darren to seek approval. So as I said, I'll share the details at the end.
Okay, next one. What junior cricket will be played and when will this start, and is this down to individual leagues?
Yeah, so individual leagues will effectively put on the programme. We had a call this afternoon with most of the junior leagues. All are looking to run some form of programme and support junior cricket, I think with this exception of the Erebus League. Fixtures will be coming out, if they haven't already in some cases, in the next few days. And I think there's some leagues that are starting from the 17th of July. So, yes, junior cricket will be played and fairly imminently.
Cool. The next couple have been answered already, so I'll skip the couple. Can players and fielders play using disposable rubber gloves? Has been asked a couple of times.
Yeah, so I tried to seek some medical advice on this, and effectively, yes, they could. I don't think there's anything to stop them playing. However, it would have little impact in if sanitisation guidelines are followed. So, the gloves would be only as good as cleaning your hands, because once you've made contact, the potentially it's on the gloves. Touch your face, it's on the gloves. So you would need to change them at every hygiene break, as you would do sanitising your hands. So it's personal preference, I think, but they would need to be changed at each interval.
Cool. We've gone over the running lanes. Cleaning. How often do we need to be cleaning seating, bars, and toilets?
Yeah, I think Mick mentioned some of them at the start. A lot of the guidance is in the facilities, preparing facilities document, which went out last week. But and all surface cleaning should take place daily, pre and post opening. So cleaning down before and after. Touch points cleaned every hour. So door handles, gaming machines, sanitizer stations, that kind of thing. Tables should be cleaned after every customer or group leaves. So there is some real clear guidance in the facilities document if you have a look in there, and there's also further guidance on the government's hospitality page.
Cool, good stuff. Do we need to specify outdoor areas where players and spectators will be allowed?
In terms of players, we should be allocating an area for players. So, as I said earlier, designated area with social distancing measures in place for kit and the player. Probably advisable to set out spectator zones to be able to manage, the flow around the ground and things. But that really needs to be something that's decided within the risk assessment that the club do. So if it's if it's a smaller ground, then you probably want to think about it. How many people can be on the ground and still adhere to social distancing.
Okay, that's all the questions. We've got a few from the chat that I've picked up. Reference was made to the signs and signage around the ground. Where can they find these resources to print and post?
Yeah, so we'll put the links on the slides when we send them out. But you can get some really good signage from Sporting England's Club Matters page, and there's also signage on the ECB's Resource Hub, both of which we'll put the links on.
Another question from the chat: do spectators need to sign in for track and trace if they're not using the bar or facilities? Yes.
Is a simple answer, because you don't know who they might have contact with during their time at the ground. So, anyone on the club premises, you must take details for.
And last one: do we need to get the details of players, given that we have the team sheets and clubs will hold their current details?
It needs to be logged. So whether you fill it in terms of taking it from the club database, but you need to have a register of who's on the ground and their contact details for that day. So, providing you can, certainly for the opposition, providing you can provide the contact details for those people on the register, then that should be sufficient. But my advice would be just take the details for everyone on the day. So you've got a record of who's been on the ground.
Just a couple more coming through now. You can probably see them at the bottom.
Richard, I could answer Phil's question about public space. That was raised at one that I went to, and what was basically the advice given through the ECB was around if you've got transient spectators who just were having a walk and just watching the cricket, you couldn't be deemed to be responsible for necessarily collecting all that information. It's really about trying to collect the people that come specifically to watch the match and be part of the experience of the day. And I know, I guess there's different ways you can look at that, but I've been on Darley Park and there's lots and lots of people that have a walk around and sit watching the cricket for 5 minutes. So that was the guidance when asked, that we were given when asked the other day. So okay, I hope that helps.
Yeah. Charlie, where have we got to down the list on the chat? I'm just trying to work my way through it.
Nazim's asked, do we need to have temp checks at entry points?
It's not something that's stipulated in the ECB guidance. So, I guess the challenges are I know it's simple to take a temperature check, but are we medically trained to be able to do that? And should we be doing that? It's not in the guidance, so no, we don't have to. Is the simple answer on that one.
And Andrea Rowan's question around track and trace, can you see that one?
Yeah. So it's a good question. The track and trace, from my understanding, would contact the individual that's tested positive. They would obviously ask them where they've been, who they've had contact with, and I believe as soon as they would mention that they played cricket on Saturday, they would ask for contact details at that club, and they would go through the track and trace of the people. Now, I guess it's down to their discretion as to who they believe had contact. That may be difficult for them to identify, and there may be a case where they ask people to isolate because they can't identify whether they've had contact with that individual. But that's why the records are really important, and then the people that are doing track and trace are trained obviously to try and work their way through that and identify it. In terms of the guidance, it basically suggests anyone that's had contact, been in contact with someone that's tested positive would need to isolate for 14 days. Now there's two types of contact: direct contact and proximity contact. So the direct refers to physical or face-to-face contact with a case for any length of time, talking to the case or being coughed on, and then proximity contact refers to indirect contact with a case, so proximity of less than 2 meters for longer than 15 minutes. So I guess it would depend on the individual and who they've been in contact with, but test and trace would work their way through that. So I can't really give a solid answer on it other than that's probably the guidance.
Coxie, can you answer Charles Jones's question?
Yeah, I will do just well if Woody wants to read the others. So it was talked about on the call earlier, and kind of the view is that the festival format for quick cricket won't happen because it's just too difficult to control, having that many people on the ground all the time from different clubs, especially at the age they are. So what we kind of suggested to the leagues is if clubs are still wanting to play games at kind of under 9 quick cricket, they set it up as just a fixture. So, for example, South Wingfield might go and play Mayor Hay, and they might play 2 or 3 games against each other on that night. But yeah, the festival format won't be happening now.
And Rich, another one from Phil Bolton. Can you see that one?
No, you read it after me, please.
Was there any further guidance on making indoor space available as a secure of storing belongings for personal belongings, particularly given that we're allowed to have buildings open for hospitality?
No, we've not got any guidance on that at the moment. Obviously, the indoor space can be open as per the hospitality guidance. I guess that may be down to each club to decide on whether there's a safe way to do that. I will ask for some clarity on it from ECB, but I don't really have an answer as to what you should be doing with personal belongings. I would suggest leaving as much as possible in the car if you're in a car, but that doesn't protect your car keys as an example. So one thing that is clear in the guidance is they shouldn't be given to the umpire, they shouldn't be given to the scorer. So let me try and get some clarity on that, and we'll come back to you.
Good stuff. I think that's all of them for now. We've answered test and trace questions. And that's it. Unless you can say any more, Mick or Rich.
Well, there's one from Gary Downing about symptoms and people having no symptoms, and what the view on the health secretary stating 80% diagnosed had no symptoms. I don't think there's anything. If somebody's got no symptoms, there wouldn't be. I'm not sure how we could.
Not much you can do with that.
What you could do with that. There's also Nazim's asked a question about hand sanitizer supply. It's something we understand that's going to come out with clubs that are involved in NatWest Cricket Force, although we haven't got the detail on that as yet. So there may be some help with that for clubs shortly. We're hoping so.
Yeah.
That's about it, Rich.
Okay. Are there any other questions just before we move on from that? We will, as I said earlier, we're going to review the questions and we'll type some answers out in a FAQs document. As I said, I have just received the ECB's one, which I believe is going to be sent out publicly tomorrow. I'll try and check to see if we can share it this evening, but it'll definitely be with you tomorrow. And I'm just looking through it. There's quite a lot of the things. So there's some more guidance on the batting running lines, and there's some more guidance on if someone comes down with COVID. So hopefully you'll get a little bit more out of that.
Woody, just a couple of questions about getting slides and things. So we'll have to send the slides out to people, and it's been recorded, this course, so it'll go on our YouTube, and then we'll send people the link so you can listen back if you've joined the call late.
Thanks, mate. Okay, so I'll move us on then. Just to summarise, really, a few things to think about. As I said, risk assessment is essential. Clubs need to carry one out before opening the clubhouse or facilities and playing at the weekend. Work through the ECB checklist for opening facilities. That's a really good document, step-by-step things to think about. Signage, vital. Make sure you've got appropriate signage up. And then, as Mick alluded to at the start, the communication's a massive thing here. So ensure, where possible, that all opposition players, officials, your own players, your own members and spectators all have seen guidance of any protocols and measures you've put in place, ideally before they arrive at the ground, and then some way of briefing people on arrival if they haven't already had it. Contact details for test and trace is a must, as Mick said, for anyone that's directly coming to watch the cricket or is involved in the game on the day. That is, that applies for training as well, and so on. As we mentioned earlier, anyone who's planning to run All Stars or isn't going to run All Stars this year, please can you let us know before the 22nd of July. And just a bit of a plea, really, to support each other to get games of cricket played. We're aware of clubs that aren't able to play this weekend already, whether it be for facilities not being available for use or health reasons or whatever it may be, but they'd like to play and rearrange games. So please be supportive. Let's try and get as much cricket played as we can safely. So support clubs with hosting games and ground availability if you can, because I think the community spirit over the last 15, 16 weeks has been fantastic in cricket. Let's not lose that now as we start to play. And then just please remember that if you aren't ready to play or you can't meet the guidelines, then there's no pressure on you as a club. Don't play until you're ready. And then the final reminder, we do have a duty of care to protect the game, but more importantly, keep people safe. So let's do everything we can to do so. So that's it from us. Thank you all for dialing in. We're pretty much on time, which is great. We will follow up with the slides and the recording as soon as possible. And as I said, we'll be sending out an FAQs document tomorrow. Take care, everyone. If you have any questions, please get in touch with us, and hopefully we'll get some cricket played this weekend. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Woody.
No problem. Thank you.